When you first see the Citroën U55 Cityrama Curus, it doesn't feel like a conventional bus at all. It looks more like a moving glass structure, almost like a greenhouse placed on wheels, or perhaps a futuristic observation lounge designed to glide slowly through a city instead of standing still. The proportions are unusual. The surfaces are dominated by glass, and the entire design seems focused on one thing above all else: visibility. This is not a vehicle that hides the outside world. It is a vehicle that exists to reveal it. To understand why something like this was built, you have to look at Europe in the 1950s, particularly France. Cities like Paris were entering a new era. Tourism was growing rapidly, and people were no longer satisfied with simply arriving at destinations. They wanted to experience the journey itself. Sightseeing became an essential part of urban culture, and traditional buses were simply not designed for that purpose. They transported people efficiently, but they did not offer an experience. That is where the Cityrama concept came in. Based on the Citroën U55 and built by the French coach builder Curus, the Cityrama buses were designed specifically for guided tours, but instead of just modifying an existing bus body, the designers rethought the entire concept from the ground up. They prioritized visibility, comfort, and atmosphere, creating a vehicle that turned every seat into a viewing position. Underneath all that glass and styling, however, the mechanical foundation remained practical and reliable. The Cityrama buses were equipped with two different engine options depending on configuration. One version used a 4.6-liter inline six-cylinder gasoline engine producing approximately 73 horsepower, while another was fitted with a 5.2-liter inline six-cylinder diesel engine producing around 86 horsepower. These engines were not about performance, but about steady, dependable operation, which was exactly what a sightseeing vehicle required. Power was delivered to the rear wheels through a manual transmission, and while acceleration was modest, the bus moved with a calm, controlled pace that suited its role perfectly. The top speed was typically around 50 to 55 miles per hour, but in reality, it rarely needed to go that fast. This was a vehicle designed to move slowly enough for passengers to actually see and appreciate their surroundings. In terms of size, the Cityrama was a substantial machine. It measured approximately 36 to 40 feet in length with a width of about 8 feet and a height reaching roughly 12 to 13 feet, largely due to its distinctive double-deck panoramic design. The curb weight was estimated between 17,000 and 20,000 pounds, depending on the specific configuration. These dimensions made it imposing on the road, but also required careful handling, especially in historic city centers with narrow streets. But what truly defined the Cityrama was not its size or its engine, it was the glass. The bus featured an extraordinary amount of glazing, with large panoramic windows running along both levels and even extending into the roof. The upper deck, in particular, offered an almost uninterrupted view of the surroundings, giving passengers a perspective that was completely different from that of a standard bus. Sitting inside, you didn't feel enclosed, you felt exposed to the city, in a way that was both immersive and slightly surreal. From an engineering standpoint, this design came with serious challenges. Glass is heavy, and using so much of it affected both the weight and the structural rigidity of the vehicle. Reinforcing the body while maintaining large transparent surfaces required careful design. There was also the issue of temperature. On sunny days, the interior could heat up quickly, turning the bus into something resembling a greenhouse. Ventilation systems were used to manage this, but by modern standards, they were relatively basic. In other words, you got an incredible view, but sometimes at the cost of comfort. Inside, the seating layout reflected the bus's purpose. Instead of maximizing capacity, the seats were arranged to provide the best possible outward visibility. Passengers were positioned to face large windows, and the upper deck offered the most desirable seating, especially for tourists eager to capture the best views of the city. The experience was less about transportation and more about observation. Driving the Cityrama required attention and patience. The vehicle's height and length meant that the driver had to constantly be aware of clearances, especially when passing under bridges or navigating tight urban streets. However, the large glass surfaces also provided excellent visibility, which helped compensate for the vehicle's size. There is also something quietly amusing about the concept, because while the idea of a glass-heavy sightseeing bus sounds ideal, reality had its own sense of humor. On a perfect day, with clear skies and mild temperatures, the Cityrama must have felt like the best seat in the city. But on a hot summer afternoon, with the sun shining through all that glass, passengers probably gained a much deeper appreciation for shade. Despite these challenges, the Cityrama buses became iconic in their own way. They represented a different approach to transportation, one that prioritized experience over efficiency. They showed that a vehicle could be designed not just to move people, but to change how those people perceive their surroundings. Over time, however, more conventional sightseeing solutions began to take over. Open-top double-decker buses offered similar visibility with fewer structural and thermal challenges, and they were easier and cheaper to operate. As a result, the Cityrama concept remained relatively rare and eventually faded from widespread use. But the Citroën U55 Cityrama Cityrama remains one of the most unique and visually striking buses ever built. It represents a moment when designers were willing to experiment boldly, to prioritize human experience, and to create something that stood apart from everything else on the road. It reminds us that transportation can be more than just movement. Sometimes it can be about perspective, about how you see the world as you travel through it. And if you enjoy discovering rare, unusual, and beautifully unconventional machines like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there are many more fascinating vehicles and forgotten stories waiting ahead.